On a freezing night, a weary black waitress heard a desperate knocking at the back of the diner. Outside lay a man, impeccably dressed but bleeding, his face a mask of cold fury. Her compassion wouldn't let her leave him there. She helped him, saving his life. But she never imagined this single act of kindness would unravel her lonely world and change her future forever. A few days later, a black Bentley glided to a stop outside her door. The ice storm hit the city like a shattered glass window. By midnight, a treacherous, clear coat of ice encased every surface, and the wind howled with a raw, vicious hunger. Power lines, heavy with ice, began to snap, plunging entire blocks into a frigid, unnerving darkness. Inside the 24-hour glow of the Morning Star diner, 62-year-old Amelia Hayes was finishing the last of her closing duties. The diner was her life, had been for 30 years. It was where she'd worked alongside her husband, Robert, before he passed, and where she'd earned the money to raise her daughter, Maya. Now, it was just her, the hum of the old refrigerator, and the storm trying to claw its way inside. Her back ached with a familiar, deep throb. The doctor said it was arthritis, a cruel reward for a lifetime spent on her feet. Some mornings, the pain was so sharp she could barely tie her own shoes. Getting old was a thief, her mother used to say, stealing your strength one day at a time. Amelia pulled her thin cardigan tighter, the diner's heating struggling against the invasive cold. The quiet was the worst part. It gave her too much time to think about how long it had been since Maya had called, swallowed by a life of bad choices and resentment Amelia couldn't comprehend. She closed her eyes, trying to push the thought away. That's when she heard it. A heavy, scraping thud against the metal back door. Amelia's eyes shot open, her heart seizing in her chest. The back door was for deliveries and staff only. No one should be out there, not at this hour, not in this storm. Her hands began to tremble. Her mind flashed to a story from the news last week, a robbery at a convenience store just 5 miles away. The clerk had been hurt. Badly. Thud. A weaker sound this time, followed by a low groan that was nearly lost in the wind. Just lock up and go, Amelia, Brenda, the night cook, called from the kitchen, already shrugging into her heavy coat. Whatever's out there, it ain't our problem. Brenda was right. The sensible thing to do was to ignore it, to walk out the front door and make the short, treacherous journey to her small apartment above the laundromat next door. But the sound had been one of pain. Amelia hesitated, her hand hovering over the deadbolt. She crept toward the door and peered through the small, grimy window pane. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. A man was slumped against the brick wall, half hidden in the shadows of the dumpster alcove. His suit, though torn and stained, was exquisitely tailored, the kind of thing she only saw in magazines. His dark hair was matted with something wet, and a gash on his forehead was bleeding freely, the blood a stark, dark contrast against his pale, ashen skin. He was Japanese, his features sharp and defined even in the dim security light. But it was his eyes that truly froze her. They were open, fixed on the door, and filled with a cold, shocking intensity. He looked dangerous. He looked like the kind of trouble that could swallow a woman like her whole. Amelia stumbled back from the door. Brenda, you should see this. He's hurt. Brenda glanced through the window and recoiled. Hurt or not, look at him. He looks like he just crawled out of a mob movie. You call 911 if you want, but I'm not opening that door. I've got kids to get home to. She didn't wait for a reply, bustling out the front and locking it behind her, leaving Amelia alone in the silent diner. Amelia stood frozen, her mind at war. Brenda was right. It was foolish. It was dangerous. But then the man's head lolled to the side, and another groan, weaker this time, escaped his lips. His skin had a bluish tint under the security light. Hypothermia. She knew the signs. She'd seen it once before, years ago, with a homeless man who'd nearly frozen to death in this same alley. That sound, the sound of a human being in agony, cut through her fear. It sliced through every logical reason to stay safe, to keep the door locked. She thought of her Robert, how he'd always stop to help a stranded motorist, how he'd say, "You never know when you'll be the one on the side of the road." Her hand moved on its own, turning the deadbolt. She pushed the heavy door open, and the wind screamed into the diner, bringing with it a blast of icy air. The man on the ground flinched. He tried to push himself up, his movements stiff and uncoordinated. "Sir? Can you hear me?" Amelia called out, her voice thin against the storm. He looked at her, his dark eyes narrowed with suspicion and pain. "Help," he rasped, the single word a testament to a will that was fighting to survive. "I'm going to help you," she said, her voice firmer now. "But you have to let me. Can you stand?" He tried, his legs buckling beneath him. Amelia rushed forward, grabbing his arm. He was heavier than he looked, solid muscle beneath the fine wool of his suit. He leaned on her, his breathing ragged, and together they stumbled into the warmth of the diner. She kicked the door shut behind them, the storm's roar immediately muffled. Up close, he was even more intimidating. A large, intricate dragon tattoo coiled up his neck, its head disappearing beneath his collar. His hands were calloused, and a thin, white scar cut across his left eyebrow. But his eyes, now that the pain was a little less sharp, held a deep, profound exhaustion. "My apartment, it's just next door." "It's warmer there," she said, more to herself than to him. "We need to get you warm." He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Leaning heavily on her, they made the slow, agonizing journey out the front of the diner and up the icy steps to her small apartment. Every step was a risk on the slick metal stairs, but they managed. Inside, she guided him to the single armchair in her small living room, and he collapsed into it, a shudder racking his body. Amelia worked on instinct. She turned the thermostat up as high as it would go, then rushed to the bathroom for her first aid kit. His forehead gash was deep, but the bleeding had slowed. As she gently cleaned the wound, he watched her every move, his gaze unwavering, analytical. "This will sting," she said softly, dabbing it with antiseptic. He didn't even flinch. "Your clothes are soaked through. You'll catch your death." I have some of my husband's old things. They'll be too big, but they're dry." She retrieved a thick flannel shirt and a pair of grey sweatpants from the closet, laying them on the couch. For the first time, he spoke in a sentence, his English accented but clear. "You are very kind." "Why?" Amelia paused, a clean bandage in her hand. "Because you needed help. Others would not have," he stated, not as a question, but as a fact. "I'm not other people," she said, pressing the bandage to his forehead. While he changed behind a privacy screen she set up, Amelia heated a can of chicken soup on the stove. It was all she had, but it was hot. When he emerged in Robert's oversized clothes, he looked less like a threat and more like a man utterly lost. He sat at her small kitchen table, his large frame dwarfing the flimsy chair. He held the warm mug of soup in both hands, as if absorbing its heat. He ate in silence. Amelia watched him, noticing the way he held himself, with a stillness and economy of motion that spoke of immense self-control. On the wall beside the table was a collection of framed photos. His eyes drifted to one of a smiling young woman with Amelia's eyes. "Maya. Your daughter?" he asked quietly. Amelia's throat tightened. "Yes. That was a long time ago." "We do not speak," she admitted, the words tasting like ash. "She made some choices. I couldn't support them." He nodded slowly, his gaze distant. Family can be a difficult wound to heal. The quiet admission hung in the air between them, a fragile bridge between two strangers from vastly different worlds. He finished his soup and set the mug down. "I must go," he said, already moving to stand. "Go? Go where?" "There's an ice storm out there." "You're in no condition." "I cannot stay." "It is not safe for you," he said, his voice low and firm. It was a warning. "It's less safe for you out there," she countered stubbornly. "You can have my bed. I'll take the couch. Just for tonight. Until the storm breaks." He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he gave another small nod. For a few hours. Then I will be gone. Amelia went to bed on her lumpy couch, pulling a thin afghan over herself. She lay awake for hours, listening to the silence from the other room, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and a strange sense of purpose. She had opened her door to a dangerous man, a man who was right to say that others would have left him in the cold. But as she finally drifted off to sleep, she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that she had done the right thing. When she woke at dawn, the apartment was silent. The storm had passed, leaving a world encased in sparkling, brilliant ice. The man was gone. There was no note, no sign he had ever been there, except for two things: Robert's clothes, neatly folded on the armchair, and a small, perfectly folded origami crane sitting in the middle of her kitchen table. Amelia picked it up. It was made from a crisp $100 bill. She smoothed it out, staring at the money. It was more than she made in a week. But it wasn't the money that struck her, it was the crane. A symbol of hope. Of gratitude. For the first time in a long time, her small, lonely apartment didn't feel quite so empty. The talk began the next day at the diner. Brenda had wasted no time. "I'm telling you, he looked like Yakuza," she whispered to one of the morning regulars, her voice loud enough for Amelia to hear. "Tattoos all up his neck. And she just took him home. At her age, it's not decent." Amelia's face burned as she refilled a coffee cup, her hand trembling slightly. She ignored them, focusing on the dark liquid swirling in the pot. But the whispers followed her all day. By the afternoon, the story had morphed. The man wasn't just injured, he was a fugitive. Amelia wasn't just helping him, she was hiding him. For money. Her landlord, Mr. Henderson, caught her on the stairs that evening. "Amelia, I've had a complaint. About a visitor. This is a respectable building. I can't have any trouble." His eyes were cold, judgmental. "He was hurt, and it was for one night," Amelia said, her voice tight with a mixture of anger and shame. "There was no trouble. See that it stays that way," he warned before turning and walking away. The isolation was crushing. The regulars who used to share a friendly word now looked through her. The other waitresses spoke in hushed tones when she entered the break room. She felt like a pariah in the only place she'd ever felt she belonged. The loneliness she had lived with since Robert's death deepened into a sharp, painful ache. The worst came 3 days later. The rumor, twisted and exaggerated, had found its way to her daughter. Maya appeared at her door unannounced, her face a familiar storm of accusation and resentment. "So, it's true," Maya began, pushing past Amelia into the small apartment. "Brenda called me. Said my mother has a rich, criminal boyfriend stashed away. Said you finally come into some money." "Maya, that's not what happened. A man was hurt, I helped him." "Helped him? Or did you find yourself a sugar daddy?" Maya's eyes, so much like her own, were hard. Amelia could see the desperation behind the anger. Maya had a son, a sweet little boy named Noah who had a host of health problems. The medical bills were a mountain they could never seem to climb. "There's no money," Amelia said, her voice pleading. "He was here for a few hours. That's all." "Liar." Maya's voice cracked. "You've always had secrets. Always holding back. You judged me for taking money from my ex, but here you are shacking up with some gangster. Where is it? Where's the money he's giving you?" "There is nothing." Maya began to tear through the small apartment like a hurricane. She dumped out drawers, pulled books from the single shelf, and tossed cushions from the couch. "It has to be here. You wouldn't risk everything for nothing. Stop it, Maya. You're destroying what little I have." Amelia cried, trying to grab her daughter's arm. Maya shoved her away. In her rage, she swept her arm across the small mantelpiece. A framed photo of Amelia and Robert on their wedding day crashed to the floor, the glass shattering. "Oops," Maya sneered, but Amelia saw a flicker of regret in her eyes before it was buried again by her desperate fury. Amelia stared at the broken photo, at her husband's smiling face split in two. A cold calm washed over her. "Get out," she whispered. "Not until I find it. Noah needs another surgery, and you're sitting on a pile of cash." In the bedroom, Maya found Amelia's emergency fund, $400 in cash tucked away in a showbox. It was money she'd been saving for months for a new pair of orthopedic shoes. Maya snatched it. "A down payment," she said, her voice shaking. "He can give you more." "That's my shoe money, Maya. I can barely walk at the end of the day." "Then he can buy you new shoes," Maya shouted, tears finally spilling down her face. "Why won't you ever just help me?" She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Amelia sank to the floor amidst the wreckage of her home and her heart. She picked up the two halves of the broken photograph. The betrayal was a physical pain, sharper than any arthritis. She had lost her husband to sickness, and now she had lost her daughter to a sickness of a different kind. Alone in the ruins, holding the shattered memory of her husband, she finally let herself cry. For days after Maya's destructive visit, Amelia sat in her wrecked apartment, too heartsick to clean. The broken picture frame still lay on the floor. She had called in sick to the diner, unable to face the whispers and the stares. She was just sitting there, staring at the wall, when a long, black car glided to a silent stop on the street below. It wasn't just a car, it was a Bentley, sleek and imposing, its tinted windows reflecting the grey sky like mirrors. A woman in a perfectly tailored dark suit emerged from the passenger side. She was Japanese, with an air of sharp, unshakable competence. She consulted a tablet, glanced up at Amelia's apartment number, and then moved toward the stairs with brisk, purposeful steps. Amelia's heart began to pound. She stood up, her hands trembling, and moved to the door just as a polite, firm knock sounded. She opened it a crack. "Amelia Hayes?" the woman asked. Her English was flawless. "Yes? My name is Aiko. I am the personal assistant to Mr. Kenji Tanaka. May I come in?" Amelia opened the door wider, speechless. Aiko stepped inside, her eyes taking in the disordered room in a single, swift glance. There was no judgment in her expression, only observation. "Mr. Tanaka sent me," Aiko continued, her voice calm and professional. "He was deeply concerned. He has been out of the country since that night. He was only just informed of what transpired after he left." Who is he?" Amelia managed to ask. Aiko gave a small, almost apologetic smile. "Mr. Tanaka values his privacy above all else. He is a businessman. A very successful, very powerful one. The night you found him, he was conducting a personal test of his security protocols by going off-grid. Unfortunately, his vehicle hit a patch of black ice and went into a ravine. He was walking for miles before he collapsed at your door." Aiko's gaze softened slightly. "He told me what you did, Miss Hayes. You showed him a kindness and a trust he has not encountered in a very long time. He is a man who inspires fear more often than compassion. He says you saved his life, and the Tanaka family always repays its debts." As if on cue, a large panel truck pulled up behind the Bentley. Several men in clean work uniforms got out. "Mr. Tanaka has taken the liberty of arranging for some repairs and upgrades to your apartment," Aiko said, as if this were the most normal thing in the world. He was distressed to learn of the conditions. I can't accept," Amelia stammered, overwhelmed. "With respect, Miss Hayes, you must." "To refuse would be a great dishonor to him," Aiko said gently but firmly. "And this is only the beginning." Over the next few hours, Amelia's world was turned upside down. The crew of workmen descended on her apartment, repairing, painting, and replacing everything with quiet efficiency. A new couch appeared, then a new bed. A man from the bank arrived and explained that a trust had been established in her name, enough money to ensure she would never have to worry about bills or work again. Her debts had been cleared. All of them. Aiko stayed with her through it all, explaining each step. "Mr. Tanaka also learned of your daughter's situation," she said, handing Amelia a file. He understands that family is complex. He has made an anonymous donation to the pediatric hospital where your grandson is treated. It will cover all of Noah's current and future medical expenses. A consultation with the top specialist in the country has also been arranged. Amelia stared at the documents, her vision blurring with tears. This mysterious, dangerous man hadn't just repaid her with money. He had listened. In their short, quiet conversation, he had heard the deepest pain of her heart, her worry for her daughter and grandson, and he had healed it. By evening, her apartment was transformed. It was clean, beautiful, and safe. Before leaving, Aiko handed her a new smartphone. There is only one number programmed into this phone, she said. Mr. Tanaka's. He would be honored if you would join him for dinner when you feel settled. He says the soup you made was the best he has ever had, and he owes you a proper meal in return. After Aiko and the Bentley were gone, Amelia stood in the middle of her new living room, the beautiful space feeling like a dream. On the new mantelpiece, she placed the two things that mattered most, the wedding photo, now in a beautiful new silver frame, and the $100 origami crane. Her new phone buzzed. It was Maya. Amelia answered, her heart bracing for another fight. Mom. Maya's voice was a choked sob. Mom, I got a letter. From the hospital. Someone paid for everything. For Noah. They said he's going to see Dr. Albright in Boston. Mom, I don't understand. She was crying so hard she could barely speak. And I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for what I did. I was so scared and so desperate, and I was awful to you. Can you ever forgive me? Amelia looked at the origami crane. She thought of the cold, intense man with a dragon tattoo, and his quiet words, family can be a difficult wound to heal. But wounds could heal if you gave them a chance. Yes, Maya, Amelia said, her own tears finally falling, not from sadness, but from a profound, startling wave of hope. I think we can start. She ended the call and walked to her new window, looking out at the city lights. She had opened her door to a stranger in a storm, an act that had nearly cost her everything. But in return, she had been given a new life. She had her daughter back, her grandson was safe, and her future was secure. And somewhere in this vast city, a powerful, reclusive man was waiting to have dinner with her. Holding the delicate paper crane, Amelia Hayes smiled. The night was over, and a new day was just beginning.